Hello and welcome to Behind the Groove. My name's James Sayer. I'm a singer-songwriter based in London in the UK. And during this series, I'm going to be chatting with some of the finest session musicians, live musicians, producers, mix engineers about their time working in the industry. I've been lucky to work with lots of these musicians and producers over the last couple of years. I'm going to ask them all the stuff I wanted to know. I love the studio. I love the old school way of recording. So it will be a bit old school. So I hope it appeals to a few people. So let's crack on. I hope you enjoy it.
And there ain't no going back.
Hi Phil, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure, James. All good, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to finally kind of meet you. I know it's not properly meeting you, but it's great to kind of meet you.
Yeah,
You know.
virtually.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the world is now virtual, isn't it? Everything's virtual, and
Yeah.
hopefully until next year. But how have you been getting on anyway?
Been doing good. I've been adapting to the situation. Doing quite a lot of online sessions, and I started a little network of tutoring with some guys, and I got a couple of students, a couple in America, one in South America, one
Fantastic.
here in Rome. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds great. Well, I'm just going to list some of the artists that you've worked with, either in the studio or in a live setting. There's probably many that I've missed out. Well, I know there's many I've missed out. But here's just a few. So we've got Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, George Michael, Elton John, Dire Straits, Robbie Williams, Lulu, Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, Take That, and many, many more. I mean, that's some lists. So tell me, how did this all start for you?
Wow. I was in the early 70s. I was just leaving school and doing all that stuff. I had two uncles in a band called the Kinks early on.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
they both stood around, and but Ray Davies started a recording studio called Conk.
Yeah.
About that time, and I used to I was already doing gigs with little bands and stuff, but I used to hang out at the studio to see how it all worked. One of the first sessions I sat in on was with a lady called Claire Hamill. I don't know if you remember her.
I don't know that name, I have to admit, no.
She was a lovely lass from County Durham, and they were making an album. I used to sit in the back of the control room and just watch what went on. And there was Phil Chen was there, the bass player, Phil Chen. I got on with him really well. And Clem Catini was on drums, I believe. So, I got to know the session guys from that period.
Sure.
And I got chatting to Phil Chen, and he said, well, there's certain things you need to do to get into the session circuit. And he gave me a few pointers and said, learn to read music, which I didn't at the time. And I still don't, actually,
Right.
to be honest. And I was noodling away when they went out to dinner one night. And Ray had left he had a beautiful old Telecaster, sunburst with a white stripe around the edge, which I used to love. I was noodling away in the studio when they all went out to dinner, and they came back, and Claire came back and was in the control room, and I didn't see her, and I was just noodling. She said, you should play on my next track.
Wow.
And so I did, and that was the first session I ever did in 1973.
Wow. And was it the guitar, was that the first instrument you actually picked up, or was it piano or something?
Ukulele. I started when I was very young. I was 5 years old, and at 5 years old, the hands are not really strong enough for full guitar. So I used to love noodling away on the ukulele, and that's where I started. Yeah.
Sure. And can you remember the make of your first guitar, the first electric guitar that was yours?
It was probably a Harmony.
A Harmony, right? Yeah.
First electric guitar. And it soon went on to a Vox Phantom, which I used to love. Shaped like a 50 pence piece. Strange things.
Wow.
That was a gift from Uncle Dave.
Wow.
So that must have been, I don't know, about 1970 probably.
Well, I mean,
No, it
that's
was much earlier, much earlier.
much earlier. Yeah.
60s, yeah, 60s.
Okay. I mean, that's some apprenticeship, isn't it? Being around the guys out the Kinks. I mean, it must have been such an incredible time. The music scene as well in London during that period was just so amazing.
It was electric.
Yeah.
It was fabulous growing up. I mean, I was about 10 when the Kinks first started to tour, and I used to watch them disappearing in an old Thames van up the A1, as it was then, the A1, before the motorway was even built, and come back sort of 4 or 5 in the morning with the van covered in lipstick from the door films.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And it just seems like magical time. It was a magical time.
It really was. And, you know, one of the things that I've talked about in previous interviews is that kind of era of music, which, you know, it's so different now, was the people listening to records and using the record sleeves to find out who the musicians were on the records and what music you liked. And of course, you can't really do that anymore. And was that something that you did back then, to find out who you wanted to play like or who inspired you?
Yeah. Even before that, when I was very young, my grandmother would have a party every weekend. And they used to, my first experience of music was a wind-up radiograms,
Sure.
record player from 78s, and people like Eddie Cochran and Jerry Lee Lewis was my early influences.
Yeah.
So that started very young. I was probably 5, 6, 7, those kind of ages when I first started to experience music and get interested in it. And yeah, it was every weekend. It was a party at my grandmother's house with. I had a lot of aunts and uncles. My mother had 6 sisters and 2 brothers, so it was a big family. I mean, everyone was musical, so that was it.
Yeah.
Really.
I've listened to previous interviews, people like Elton John, and said during that kind of era, there was always a piano in the house, usually an upright piano, which of course now you kind of see pianos being kind of destroyed and people want to get rid of them for nothing. But back then, kind of, it was so important, wasn't it? The kind of family around the piano. I know my parents had it.
Absolutely. You have to remember that I was born in 1952. It's only 7 years after the Second World War.
Yeah.
And I think there was still a kind of feeling of freedom. And it was, the party thing was, I think, left over from the end of the Second World War. I mean, families got together, enjoyed themselves. There was a lot of alcohol involved, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But we had a pub across the road called the Clissold, which is still there in Muswell Hill, and everyone used to pile in there and come back and have a party every weekend. And it was based upon music, basically.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And you mentioned, you touched on kind of being told to learn to read music. Did you have a teacher that taught you how to read music, or did you kind of pick it up yourself?
I picked it up myself, just through trial and error, really.
Yeah.
I avoided it pretty early on because it just seemed like a lot of hard work for not much gain.
Yeah.
And I'd learned from ear anyway, and I was pretty good at sort of latching onto chord sequences and improvising. So I didn't really think I needed it. And to be honest, I think in my 50 odd years of doing sessions, I've needed to read probably 3 or 4 times.
Wow, really?
So, but it's strange because you get used to recognizing it.
Sure.
I used to work with a guy who was classically trained called Jeff Wesley, and he'd write something out for me, and I'd look at it and think, man, this is Chinese. He said, that's Johnny B. Good.
Yeah.
He said, once you recognize that,
yeah,
you can, it's not rocket science, honestly.
Absolutely, yeah. I actually first came across your career when I was about 2 years of age. My dad recorded a VHS, which they were back then, of a concert called Nebworth 90, and you were playing at the time with Eric Clapton. And honestly, I credit this video for me getting into music, and yourself being a big part of that. Even though I'm a piano player, I also play a bit of guitar, and to watch you play, and that concert in particular inspired me so much. And obviously, you were playing with Eric Clapton at the time. and played many concerts. But what was it like being part of that concert in particular, with all those big names on the bill and you backed them?
It was great fun that day, for lots of good reasons. It was my first meeting with Mark Knopfler,
Wow, yeah.
actually, and that went on to something else, obviously. But Eric's band was magnificent.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a privilege to be involved with that band. I mean, Nathan East and Steve Ferroni, Greg Fillinganes, and Ray Cooper. I mean, it was a genius band, and it was so much fun to be involved in. And everyone was so good that you didn't really even need to rehearse. You kind of just went up there and tried things out in front of 120,000 people. And it was always fun. And, you know, everyone was listening to each other and bouncing off each other. And things would just kind of happen spontaneously. It was just the best experience.
Yeah, there's something really special. I've kind of followed Eric Clapton's career over the years, and he's had different bands, obviously all fantastic, but there's something really special about that band. And for me, it kind of gets a lot more soul out of Eric Clapton's playing that band, because that band is very soulful, and it kind of towards gospel to my ears anyway.
It was, yeah. Eric was, I mean, he's a wonderful player, of course.
Yeah.
But he used to, it was kind of unspecified how, you know, his solo sections would last. They were random, you know. If he was on a roll, they would just keep going. Yeah. And you know, solos could last minutes rather than bars. You know? You didn't count the bars. Yeah. Is that annoying you? That noise?
No, it's okay. Don't worry.
Don't tell them to shut up. Oh, stopped. Okay. So yeah, I mean, everybody had to keep an eye on each other and keep an eye on Eric, and eventually there would be some kind of cue to end a solo sequence. But there was one special occasion in Africa, because we did a quite bizarre African tour, and I think it was probably the one in Mozambique. And the audience were. There was a lot of tribesmen there. I mean, it was a weird concert. A lot of people had come up from South Africa, because we still weren't allowed to play in South Africa. So there was a lot of people coming up from there. But the audience was kind of 50%. There was probably 50,000 people there. And I would say it was 50% local tribesmen in bright robes and stuff. Sure. Wow. South Africans dressed in sort of Western stuff. Yeah. So it's... but they picked up on a little riff. There was a riff that we used to play. Sorry. It's called Same Old Blues. Yeah. So that riff, and Eric would blaze away over that for however long he wanted to. But on this particular night, the tribesmen in the audience picked up on that, and they all started singing it in this kind of tribal thing, and it was coming back from us, and it was an amazing sound. And they were also stamping on the ground on 1 and 3, so get. And Eric was just getting off on it. The solo went on for 20 minutes.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. I love that about that era of that band, as I say. It's just so much spontaneity involved with the playing, you can tell. And so I would urge anyone watching this who hasn't checked out that rhythm section to check it out, because it's so special. And another one of the concerts around that period was the Albert Hall. Is it 24 nights, I think, at the Albert Hall? And I know Eric Clapton has described the Albert Hall as being a bit like playing in his front room. Yeah. Would you say, is that one of your kind of really favourite venues? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I used to love playing at the Albert, especially with Eric. I mean, with anybody, it was always great fun. Yeah. But there was a kind of weird intimacy about the Albert Hall, because the audience, although it's a big place, the audience are very close. Yeah. They're up beside you, around you. So it was a great fun place to play. But I used to get down there in the middle of the afternoon for gigs, just so I could sit in the auditorium.
Yeah. Wow.
Around and feel the atmosphere, because it was a really special place. Still is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. I know obviously prior to playing with Eric Clapton, I think you were playing with Tina Turner. Is that correct?
Immediately prior to Eric, it was Paul Brady. But
Oh, it's Paul Brady. Okay.
yeah.
And what was the link with Eric Clapton? How did you kind of get put in touch with him?
It was through Paul Brady, actually, because I think, yes, it probably was. Brady had asked Eric to come and play on the track, which he did. And it was called, what's it called? Can't remember. Can't remember the title, but Eric guested on one of Brady's recording tracks, and he came to see us, and it was a bizarre experience for me because we were playing at the Mean Fiddler in Harleston.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dingy little nightclub.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And I looked out into the audience and I saw Eric Clapton looking at me, and it was I thought, oh my God, it's God. And he came back after the show and said hello, and we didn't really speak to each other, but I'd obviously struck a chord with him, excuse the pun, but we bumped into each other again a few months later in Antigua.
Yeah.
I went on holiday in Antigua, and he walked up the beach, and we started chatting again. And he said, I'm doing some recording after Christmas. Can you pop along? So that was the start, really.
Wow, that's fantastic. And obviously you probably answered my next question, but going back to your earlier days, was it the pubs and the clubs that you kind of played a lot in around London? And can you remember the moment where you did your first big session and you thought, wow, I'm actually doing this? Can you remember that?
It's a very gradual process. You don't you don't have that point. I didn't have that point.
You didn't have one, right?
And even, you know, playing at Madison Square Gardens with Eric Clapton later on, it's a gentle curve, you know,
you're on the journey.
And it was an interesting journey, and because as a working musician, you go on to the next thing. You don't really think about what you're doing.
Of course.
So it's this constant process of the next gig, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I sat down a couple of years ago and I thought, holy shit, I've done quite a lot of stuff. And I started writing a book about it, which I've just finished.
Ah, fantastic. And when's that going to be out, Phil?
Well, we're just putting the pictures in place now. I just got permission yesterday to use, there's a great shot from Nebworth.
Ah.
Hang on, let's see if I can find it and show it to you, because it's just a great shot.
Yeah.
And I just got permission for it to use it. So
that's fantastic.
See if I can find it real quick.
And you know, while you're looking for that, one of the funny things about that concert was that on one of the songs, obviously I was only 2, 3, 4 years of age and I was getting into blues music, but I didn't really know it was blues music. And Eric Clapton broke a string and he said, "Play it, Phil." And I used to jam along to your solo so much as a kid. As much as I love Eric Clapton, I'm kind of glad he broke the string because I managed to copy so many of your licks as a kid.
That was a little bit stressful, that moment, because I mean, it's a 12 bar, so it wasn't rocket science to play over. But I didn't mind about the 120,000 people watching. Okay, that was fine. That's all part of the gig. The thing that bothered me was that over to my right, Eric Clapton was standing talking to Mark Knopfler, right? And sort of looking at me like that. And I'm playing this solo, and I saw the pair of them. That's what bothered me more than anything.
Yeah. That's funny.
Where's this picture? Let me see if I can find it, because it's really worth a look.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see it.
Carry on talking.
Okay, and I was just about to mention that obviously after you worked with Eric Clapton, you did actually go on to work with Mark Knopfler with Dire Straits, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how long were you with Dire Straits for?
Well, I suppose it was about 3 years in total.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Ah, great.
It's a bit small, but...
That's a really great photo, isn't it? Wow, Elton John, Eric Clapton, and Phil Palmer. Fantastic shot. Well,
It is.
I'll be sure to buy that book anyway. Do you think maybe next year it'll be out?
I think, well, hopefully before Christmas, but let's see.
Oh well, I'll be.
It'll be on the website, and I hope we're just, as I say, finishing it off now, doing some editing and stuff.
Yeah, I'll be sure to share it on Instagram and all that kind of stuff for you, and I look forward to it. We touched upon reading music again earlier, and you mentioned, and I'm sure there's been so many sessions that you've turned up to over the years, not really knowing what to expect. Maybe, and what kind of personality do you think you need to have to go into a studio and make the part believable?
Again, it's a learning curve process. You just get good at dealing with it. At the peak of sessions, I mean, sessions don't really happen so much now, but at the peak of sessions, I was doing probably, in the early days, I could do 3 different sessions in 3 different studios in one day.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I just used to keep 6 guitars and a couple of amps in the car, and pull stuff out as I needed it. And you just get good at walking into a place full of strangers and trying to figure out what's going on, get an idea of the music, try and share a joke or have a cup of tea or whatever it is.
Yeah.
After 10 minutes, you're kind of working and figuring it all out. And in the old days, they would give me a kind of idea of what they wanted. They wanted the style of Jimi Hendrix or the style of Eric Clapton. But after a few years of doing it, people used to ask me to do sessions in the style of Phil Palmer, which was a big step forward.
Yeah,
because you automatically know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, some compliment. Play it in the style of yourself,
Yeah,
that
was the process.
Yeah, it's interesting because I spoke. You mentioned just before we started the recording about having to adapt, and I spoke to Steve Pierce, the bass player. I did an interview with Steve, and he said something really interesting to me, and it's kind of stuck in my head throughout this period, and I've definitely had to do it. Is adapt or die.
Yeah.
And have you found at the moment? Are you doing any kind of recording at home, and what kind of equipment are you doing at home, or are you just waiting until you're back in the studio?
I've never been one for having a home studio. A long time ago, I went out and bought everything.
Right.
And then it was stuck down the end of my lounge in my old house, and in the boxes. And I think I went on tour almost immediately. And when I came back, it was still in the boxes, like months later. I thought, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I don't really. So I got rid of it all again.
Yeah.
But I much prefer going out to work.
I understand that. Yeah.
For me, that's a much more productive thing to do. There's too many distractions at home, as you can hear. I mean, there's people making tea and stuff over there. It's a distraction. I need to be focused.
Yeah, I get that.
And I'd much rather have a good young engineer that knows what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Saves time, saves energy.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And you said, obviously, I mean, music has changed so much in the last 20 years, especially. Obviously, it's not as many sessions anymore where everyone's in the room and playing, which I love. That's my thing. But
yeah, me too.
I mean, modern music, of course, is so different now. It's like chalk and cheese, and it's actually really rare to hear real instruments in the top 40 charts anymore. Which is, I think, it's really sad, personally, to me. And where do you see the scene going in the next kind of 10, 20 years?
I see it's kind of cycling. I'll give an example. I work a lot with Trevor Horn.
Yeah.
And we're old mates. He's gone through the entire cycle in his lifetime. He started off as a session bass player back in the 70s for the BBC Radio Orchestra. He was humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And he went through that, and he became. He met Jill Sinclair, became a record producer, started his own label, got into the technical aspect of production, which he became very famous for. Things like Yes and Grace Jones and Seal and all those great things that he did. And he went through that process, and the first few sessions I did with him, it was pretty cold, and he said, "Don't worry about what you play." He said, "If it's not what I want, then I'll modify it until it is."
Sure.
And you think, well, yeah, it's not really contributing anything. So, but then gradually, he started to come around to doing things in the old-fashioned way again, and and putting sessions together. Studio guys and would specifically ask you to contribute something to what was going on. We went through a phase of doing that, and then I got involved with all kinds of things. And then I was doing some overdubs on, I think it was Robbie Williams' album with Trevor, and we started talking about Dire Straits' Legacy, which is the thing that I do in my spare time, which is a lot of fun. It's some of the guys from Dire Straits, Alan Clark and Mel Collins, and
right.
Ferroni was there for a while.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it during the session. He said, "Do you need a bass player?" I said, "Well," I said, "Why?" He said, "Yeah, I'd love to come and do that." So he joined our band as a bass player with no other kind of stress.
Yeah.
He got away. He left what he was doing as a producer and just said, "I just want to be a bass player again." So he's gone full circle. In other words,
yeah,
through all the techno stuff,
through
all of those years of being, top producer in the world, back to being a bass player, and he's having fun again.
Wow, that's it. I mean, for me, I just don't think you can beat being in the room with a bunch of musicians, can you? And just going back into the monitor room and listening back, and it's just such a magical thing. But one of the things that, of course, is now there's so many studios are shutting down. Even in my kind of relatively short career, there's been studios that I've worked in, like State of the Arc. I don't know if you know that one in West London. That's now closed as a proper studio, and the guys I've interviewed have said it was like you said, they were doing 3 sessions in a day, and there was studios everywhere. But now it's really sad, isn't it, to see the amount that have shut.
I was doing a bit of research for the book, because I used to find my way around London by where the studios were.
Yeah.
When I first started driving, that's how I knew where I was. At one point in the 70s, there were 400 working studios in London.
Wow.
Or in the surrounding areas of London. There's now probably less than 10.
I was going to say, I think you're probably right. Probably about less than 10, yeah. I mean, I guess it's just a sign of the times of being out. People are doing it from home, and there's not actually any, unfortunately, for the mainstream music, there's not really a need for real instruments, which is so sad, isn't it?
Again, it's coming round again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on. People are working together again in all kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And vinyl and analog and all that stuff is making a bit of a resurgence. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a band, I don't know if you know of them, that you might like, called Wolfpack. Have you heard of Wolfpack?
No.
I think I'll send you their stuff, because I think you'd really, really appreciate their music. Kind of big following, and I think they did Madison Square Garden, but they've never had a hit or anything like that. But they're kind of an underground band, and it's all recorded live in the room, and it's really fantastic, So yeah, is there anyone you'd say has been kind of a mentor to you over the years, somebody that you can turn to as a role model?
Strangely enough, my mentor, who started me off on the session circuit early on, was a guy called Dave Marquis. He was a bass player. And he died last week, which was really sad.
Yeah.
So I popped something up on my Facebook about him. He was absolutely my mentor. He got me involved in some great sessions early on. We did Frank Zappa together in 1979, things like that.
Yes.
And he was a great player and was a very successful bass player until one day he disappeared. Literally, kind of overnight, he stopped doing sessions and disappeared. I never saw him again. Oh. And it was a weird thing. I never really got to the bottom of why. I think it was some kind of religious thing, but and I never saw him again. I was really sad that he had passed away without me ever bumping into him again. It was sad.
Yeah, very sad. And what would you say it keeps you going and motivates you now as a musician? Is it just the love of music, or are there other things that motivate you?
Yeah, it's being able at the moment, I think, we were saying that you evolve into this new situation. Now I'm in a situation where I can use all the elements that I've learnt over the last 50 years, like songwriting, like production, like guitar playing, like arranging. All those things have now come into one kind of blob. And I'm enjoying doing that at the moment because Alan Clark and I got commissioned to do a couple of albums for a big Italian artist called Renato Zero.
Okay.
And so we were able to build an album from scratch.
Oh, fantastic.
Basically.
Yeah.
Which was great fun.
Yeah.
You know, with him, the artist sort of looking over our shoulders while we were doing it and saying, yeah, I like this and this is the direction I want to be in and blah, blah, blah. And it was great fun to actually build something from nothing into, in fact, it's turned into 2 albums that we've done with him now, where we've written all the songs and done all the production and played all the instruments. So it was a nice sort of culmination of everything that I've learned over the last 50 years, really.
Yeah, so you've obviously done bits and pieces of producing along the way as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that always strikes me about some of the guys I've worked with, you know, like yourself, you're also very humble. All the guys I've worked with, and reputation plays a big part. Would you agree? Kind of, because you're a go-to player for countless MDs and producers. Would you say that's obviously an important thing?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's just got to be accessible.
Yeah.
And the key to everything really is that you can do what you're supposed to do. You know, you've got to be good at what you do, otherwise you're not going to last. You know, simple as that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I'm going to ask you one more question. I know this is probably asked by so many people, have probably asked you and other musicians, and I sometimes wonder why they're asking it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What would your advice be to younger musicians now who are trying to get a break, you know, trying to get a break either as a studio musician or a live musician? What would your kind of few tips be to them?
Okay, be yourself. Be reliable, be punctual, be good, because it's all about reputation. And, you know, if you can start building a reputation as I did when I was young, it lasts your whole life, really. As long as you don't fuck up anywhere on the way, which we all do from time to time. It depends how visible you are when you're doing it. For example, the moment you mentioned at Nebworth when Eric broke a string and I played a solo, I got away with it. You know, I was ready for it. I was able to do it. If I'd have fucked up on that, it would have looked really bad.
Yeah, that's very, very true. You know, and I got to say, actually, one of my hopes is that Eric Clapton gets that band together for at least one show.
Well, I actually did suggest that to him not long ago. And he may do.
I'd love that so much. I really, really hope he does that, you know, because it's such a special band. And of course, I was too young at the time to see it. So for me, that would be fantastic. And another one of my ambitions is to actually do a recording session or a live session with you guys at one point. That's one of my dreams, have you on my own music one day. So I'm still hoping that can happen. Well,
it's doable.
Yeah.
A lot of remote sessions going on now.
That's true, yeah.
Which is, it's not the same, but it kind of works. We don't really have an alternative, so I'm enjoying it while I can.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of good a little bit to reset as well, and hopefully have a busy 2021. Hopefully,
it's looking good on paper. Yeah, we've got a bunch of gigs scheduled for next year. I think starting around March, including one in London with the Dire Straits Legacy.
Ah, great! That sounds good.
It's going to be in May, I think May 23rd, the O2.
Ah, great.
So I look forward to that.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for chatting to me today. It's been really great and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much, James.
Cheers.
Share some love and motion with you.